Dennis, so good to have you on the podcast. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm really good. I'm really good. I've been really looking forward to like this chat, for really ever since the AI summit, after fall when we had it scheduled, so and the reason is that it was Chris Marietti, over at Cigna that introduced Qrypt and you to the community, and we're just like we're better for it, to have you guys involved. And so I thought it would be really good to have a conversation about one. I want you to kind of explain a little bit about your career background and kind of like your journey, because it's really so interesting. And then I thought it'd be good if we spend a little bit of time talking about quantum computing. It's it's a confusing space, a confusing area. You're kind of like you're in that space, and obviously from an encryption point of view. So anyway, I'll kind of guide us through that. But why don't we first start with you just going through a little bit of like your journey has been like, and what kind of led you to Qrypt.
Sure. I'm an academic by background. I'm a physicist. I was studying string theory in grad school when I was looking for a longer term position somewhere at a university nationally, and I ended up getting recruited into the intelligence community for 20 years, where I worked on a lot of big high tech projects. And some of my last jobs exposed me to the kind of IP theft and crypto breaking that we were seeing for generations that we really hadn't experienced before. So when I was looking at retirement, I really wanted to do something that wasn't building another widget or just working for another Beltway bandit. Really wanted to do something that kind of continue my career doing something for national security, but in this regard, it's really national economic security to try to help secure our infrastructure really against the threats that exist today and what's coming down the road with quantum, which everyone's aware of it now. And we really, when we started this journey, we really looked at the two big technologies that were going to change everything for us. And those were AI, that was clear, years ago, and quantum, which is, as you said already, it's a little harder to understand and get your mind around it, but it really will change everything for all industries involved. And we've never had these kinds of computing resources
Yeah.
before, so it's hard for people to get their mind around it, but I hope we'll talk about that a little bit today.
Yeah, well, that's like one. I think your path. The folks who I've known who kind of like studied physics, in college, are, very deep thinkers, and so for you to go into the intelligence community as well. So you got deep thinking, and then you have like kind of internet. I'm kind of thinking international espionage. It's like chasing down international criminals. It's like kind of hacking. And it's like it's kind of an exciting James Bond kind of career. So, do you want to share any particular stories that you can share from that experience?
Sure. I mean, there was some of that, cloak and dagger stuff, but a lot of it was really the high tech projects that we worked on. We have extraordinary resources in the U.S., from the national labs to academia to the folks in the intelligence community themselves, who people probably don't realize it, but a third of the CIA is Director of Science and Technology. This is the people that build all the imaginary gadgets that you can think about from movies. But that's all amateur stuff from our perspective. The things that we worked on were really almost incomprehensible for people to imagine. It was actually kind of funny because we would see articles published how some things that we did were just impossible. And so I look at what's happening with quantum computer and people, just years ago saying that these would never be built and it's impossible for all these reasons. And we've seen every single year this massive increase in computing power, qubit counts, and so on. I've seen that all before in the Intel community, where all that stuff happens behind closed doors in the black world, and the stuff never emerges publicly. So
Mm.
that's a very maybe different perspective than people have of hunting down bad guys. Sure, we did a lot of that, but the tech that goes into that
Hmm.
is just almost beyond belief. The supercomputing resources just to process the volumes of data that we're experiencing today, and the amount of technology that needs to be brought to bear from many different fields, from photonics, from big data, and so
Hmm.
on. It's just a fascinating thing for anyone to get involved in as part of their
Yeah.
career. And really, from my perspective, I wanted to look at it from, not the dark side of getting into terrorist networks, let's say, but to defend U.S. companies against the kind of threats that we see from nation states like China, where they
Hmm.
didn't have these capabilities 10 or 15 years ago. A lot of the technology that you see emerging today came out of cybersecurity research that could only be done by NSA 20 years ago. Now it's just
Yeah.
common researchers are more than capable of finding these flaws in our infrastructure, software implementations, and so on. And I really want to do something about that, so my kids don't end up working for Huawei one day.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's, it's what a great goal and, an aspiration and contribution, as well. And, it's interesting. I remember, talking with, both kind of Daniel Conroy and, he was the CISO over at Raytheon. Now he's a CTO. And then also Gene Sun, the CISO over at FedEx. And, and they were like, Gene in particular, Gene was, at FedEx when they got hit with the WannaCry, virus. And so that, I forget how much money that cost them, kind of that whole shutdown and that cleansing, if memory serves me right, it was kind of up around 50 million or so. And I think, so he lived through that experience, as well did Merck, during that time frame. And what he was really concerned about, though, is not those kinds of exploits, but more that when a kind of nation state like a North Korea or an Iran have you in the crosshairs, that you can't defend yourself as a corporation. So I think that's really where you came in, and kind of the organization that you were, part of, is that you need the federal government to really kind of step in and to help corporations out, if they're now being targeted by those nation states.
They certainly are. We had to notify many that they were completely penetrated, and in many cases, cauterizing that, or at least putting a wall around some of these people until they could phase them out, was too challenging from a business perspective. They're so embedded, ingrained in some of these systems. But one of the things that you could have really done in many cases to prevent the spread of some of these WannaCry type exploits was just doing very strong encryption, which is available to a lot of people on the network. It's just not turned on. And
Hmm.
that prevents a lot of what we see today, which is the reconnaissance phase, which is mapping out the network, mapping out who's related to whom. We call that on the intelligence community side, it's the social graph, how everyone's connected to everyone else, and then the machine graph, how all those devices are connected to each other.
Hmm.
And the number one thing that should keep people up at night is, like you said, the nation state penetration attacks. It's not the ransomware. Like, yes, okay, that sucks. You have to pay out some money, but it's really the things that you don't know about that are preparing, for World War III and so on. I'll give you lots of examples of that, but from the perspective of a nation state actor, like let's say the Chinese MSS, above all else, above their collection requirement for information and intelligence, they want to protect their sources and methods. So when
Hmm.
the bad actors are found on your network, they had to have put something there already for you to find. So the forensics team that do their investigation, oh, we figured it out. It was a bad password. It was some phishing email or something like that. That has to be there to protect their real mechanism behind it. That is, the crown jewels. Think back to when Stuxnet was done. We
Yeah.
don't publicly know anything about how that actually happened. Sure, we can go speculate about how it was ultimately discovered by some third world antivirus hunters, somehow magically discovered a completely unknown worm on a closed air gap
Hmm.
network. So if you do the math on those situations, there's reasons for that, and that's really to protect sources and methods, and that's what we should really be concerned about: the things that we don't know.
Yeah. Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Great. Great point. So let's spend a little bit of time talking about quantum. So All right, I'm gonna kind of show like my total ignorance, and so like the closest I came to like quantum is I actually did take a course, kind of a kind of an advanced physics course. So I have double E degree and system engineering masters. So at the one point in time, I thought I did want to be a physicist. Because I took this course called Modern Physics, and there was probably like about like 300 people in the class, and I was probably like one of the last 10 in it. So I thought, okay, I've got the right stuff, until I took another course on wave theory, um, and the first day, it's like F equals ma, and then that all got blown out, with wave theory, and I'm like the board is just full, with just a lot of math, and I'm like, yeah, I'm not sure if I'm really cut for this, So, but anyway, but I did, but I did study, quantum, but I still don't understand it, And so, like the way that, and this is my analogy, for it's like when we kind of think about like kind of an analog signal, and we want to digitize that, we take these small samples of that, right? And depending upon where that where the wave is, that will correlate to either 0, 0, 0, 1, depending upon how long of the string of digits that you want. And so that provides a way to kind of digitize kind of the analog world, and then obviously we have computing that can now process all that. In quantum, that we're talking about states, and then and to my mind, I still don't understand like how a chip like the one that was just announced from from Google, with the group over in Santa Barbara, now takes those states and how they can actually do calculations, based upon those. Because there's like, what the boson theorem, like, you can't observe, once you observe something, you kind of like, um, you kind of lose it. The entanglement thing kind of confuses me. So it's like, I don't know, Dennis, throw me a bone, kind of help me figure this out if you can. Okay.
Well, I'll just, as a prerequisite to this, in the United States, we don't have enough people pursuing physics. And I think people are deterred from getting a degree in physics because they don't give it enough time to sink in. Physics concepts just get absorbed over a period of time where you get comfortable with them. They're completely, in quantum mechanics, counterintuitive. They don't make sense from our everyday experience. So that's an issue that we have nationally that we need to do better on. And the demographics
Hmm.
in physics is horrible, of course, because very few women go into it, very few minorities. It's predominantly, for whatever reason, just one demographic that pursues it. And we will never really have a major quantum industry in the U.S. until we fix that problem. And Qrypt, our company, is involved in that with the National Science Foundation, helping people do that at an earlier phase in their career in high school. So if you don't have any physics from high school, you can't finish in 4 years in college with a physics degree. So that's a huge deterrent for people. And you saw some
Hmm.
of that in engineering. And I taught undergraduate physics, and I saw people getting weeded out for degrees in pharmacy and electrical
Hmm.
engineering because they couldn't pass the physics class. And that's really uh, an indictment on
Yeah.
what we do in education now. Separately, on quantum, the concepts from quantum are things that are just physically manifest. We observe them. This is how the universe works. We just have to accept some things like entanglement. And entanglement is really
Hmm.
at the heart of quantum mechanics and what we do on the Qrypt side with entropy, where two particles, no matter how, if they're entangled, they're created in an entangled state together, no matter how far apart they are, we treat them as a single particle. So if something changes on one particle, there's an immediate change on the other particle. That's the simplest way to conceptualize it. And that's just something we accept like
Hmm.
gravity. It's just the way the universe works. And then the other piece of it is as you already mentioned, with the difference between digital bits, the ones and zeros of analog systems and digital computers, and what we have in quantum mechanics, which is qubits, which is a single qubit can hold any combination of a 0 and 1 in a single state. And why is that so important for quantum computers?
Hmm.
Because when you can hold that much information in a single qubit, adding each additional qubit doubles the power of a computer. Logical qubits I'm talking
Mm.
about here. So although the number of bits you need for a transistor-based computer grows linearly with the number of transistors that you pack into a chip, with a qubit, one more qubit, logical qubit, doubles the output power of that
Mm.
chip. So that scales extraordinarily fast. So the numbers I like to give to people to get their mind around it is with just 300 logical qubits. That's not a lot of qubits, right? That's more computing power than if you could ever turn every single atom in the entire universe into a supercomputer, not just into a transistor
Wow.
computation. That's a small number to reach, and we only need a few thousand of those to break all of encryption systems that we use today. And if you just scale back to high school mathematics, the concepts of quantum mechanics, the basics pieces that we talk about with entanglement and with superposition,
Yeah.
that's all basic algebra. Yes, we use a
Yeah.
different form of it in physics that makes it more complicated and a little bit more usable for quantum field theory and other things like string theory later on. Those concepts can be learned in high school. We don't have to
Yeah.
go into deep quantum mechanics or modern physics like you took and weed out all these people who suffered through the first couple courses. We can get there nationally, and really, for people understanding quantum computers, those numbers, those are coming very fast. You saw with Willow what they've already done. A couple other companies
Yeah.
made those same kinds of announcements this year. Once we reach that kind of computing power, we're in a realm that could never have happened before without quantum computers. So it's not that we could do this with supercomputers or things could have been done with an abacus. All that computing power that could ever have been built means nothing compared to what a small quantum computer could do. We're very close to that threshold already.
Yeah, that's like it's an amazing kind of thought to think of. I know there's clearly there's a lot of work to be done there, like operating systems and compilers, and and how do you kind of layer on top of that? So like we're kind of really at kind of the the hardware kind of level and in that arc around quantum computing, but the sheer fact that we can kind of imagine like the scale of this, or we know like from small numbers we get huge results, is it basically just like expands your mind, to think about, my God, what kind of problems might we be able to solve, or what kind of problems might maybe we can't, maybe there are no problems that we can't solve is what I'm trying to say. If we can get this whole stack, together, the both kind of the hardware of this and operating systems and compilers and all the constructs and all the tools that go along with having some commercial available kind of computing system. So
I'll say those are happening in parallel. So the people that are building the quantum computing hardware, there's an
mm,
entire ecosystem already building all the software, the compilers, everything else you need to use it. So when it comes to that, you'll just use a regular Python library to program it. You won't know exactly how the other stuff happens behind the back. You don't know how Linux systems work. You don't know where the registers are being accessed and all that. You won't need that. You'll want to solve something for molecules. Again, when you can solve problems that are otherwise completely impossible, you've opened up entire industries to innovation that we've never seen before. And the most impacted one will probably initially be AI. We're reaching a point
yeah.
now
So
where,
Dennis, so you basically tell
sorry, we're,
no, go
we're
ahead.
reaching this plateau with what's happening with LLMs and how big we can build GPU clusters and how much power is left on this planet to even build more water cooled data centers. That
Yeah.
can't go beyond a certain point without some novel application in hardware like quantum computers, which again scale doubly exponentially, not with
um,
each additional supercomputer built, but with each additional qubit, you're growing and doubling the power.
yeah. Yeah, so I want to make sure I understood something that you just said. Are you basically saying that a lot of the compilers that aren't existing today that will essentially just abstract kind of a quantum hardware layer that's underneath it, and so all those constructs, all of those tools, and the skills that are now have been accumulated, in the industry, are still relevant in a quantum world?
Absolutely. And you won't know the difference between
Hmm.
the code that's running on a classical computer and that running on a quantum computer. Some resources will be using quantum computation, others will use classical computation, and that'll all happen in the libraries that people are already building today. So I don't think any special skills will come out of it other than people that are building those libraries and the tools. Those are very hardcore, physicsy kind of researcher people that understand how, to build these circuits, because you're really designing quantum circuits here to make computation possible.
Wow, wow, that that's even more interesting than I had thought. Around quantum, it's just like being able to kind of leverage all of kind of the development tools that we already have, and the talent that we already have. Yeah, that's huge.
Yeah, you're giving people a
Okay,
tool.
let's now.
I'm just saying, you're just giving the same people much more powerful tools that didn't exist
Yeah,
or couldn't have existed without quantum.
yeah, yeah, for sure. Okay, boy, we can spend a lot of time on this, but I want to kind of like take a little bit of we'll kind of bring it back to Qrypt and encryption. So obviously this kind of leverages your experience with the intelligence agencies and what you saw there. We also know that quantum can break all the security or the encryption algorithms that we have today. So it's like there's been, and that's been pretty well documented and pretty well understood that we really need to start thinking about different ways to do encryption in order to preserve our way of life and especially our digital life. So let's talk a little bit about okay, what brought you into like because you're a co-founder or a Qrypt. What was the main problem that you saw, and how you decided to kind of go about solving it.
Yeah, the main problem is that most of cybersecurity is just regularly broken. And part of that is the origin story of how we built the internet, which was based on 1970s telecommunications infrastructure and public key infrastructure, which is effectively a single point of failure. Any part of that system, the key generation mechanism, the libraries that we use, the software implementation, any part of it breaks, you lose all security. That was
Mm.
great for the 70s when we had Alice and Bob were connected by a single copper wire and a handful of switches. That was the only way they could establish a secret channel. Well, we
Mm.
don't live in that world today. So we have to virtualize and abstract away a lot of this infrastructure, and we also have to make it extremely redundant and resilient against any single point of failure. There should not be one thing that can break on that chain that compromises your security. And so, as we're transitioning through the NIST standards, through a new set of algorithms that are believed to be secure against quantum computers, we don't know. There's no proof that that's true. We also
Mm.
have to advance the architecture that we're using. So, even if they are broken by some other algorithms in the future, even with or without quantum computers, that we're still secure. So, the problem right now is that a little almost 2 years ago, of the remaining two algorithms that were supposed to be standardized, one of them was broken by a regular laptop computer. And the concern now, from what we hear from the industry, is that if we transition to this other one, Kyber, and we don't have any proof of security of it, we just hope that it's secure. What if that breaks and we've gone through all this expense and trouble of
Mm.
transitioning? Uh, we've also been told by the government to be crypto agile, prepare to hot swap these algorithms out at any point in the future. But the backup algorithm was already broken. There's nothing to backfill it with if that breaks. So the solution to that is what Qrypt has done is effectively eliminate this architecture of distributing encryption keys. That's the basis for PKI, is to distribute encryption keys between
Mhm.
users. And instead of distributing them, which is maybe the original sin from PKI infrastructure, is we simultaneously generate them at the endpoints. And probably too long of a conversation for today, but if you're familiar with how quantum key distribution works, it effectively achieves that. And that's a very physical layer solution where you have an appliance at two endpoints with a single unbroken piece of fiber connecting them. We've abstracted that away and inverted the model and put all the hardware in the cloud and made that available to any endpoint. So we have quantum entropy sources that were developed by the US government at Los Alamos and Oak Ridge National Lab, and we use those to generate huge amounts of quantum keys at any endpoint inside all of your other cybersecurity infrastructure. so that's never at risk. And we call that harvest now and decrypt later, where our nation state adversaries are collecting that data, where the encryption keys and the encrypted data that is used with it is all in the same channel. So we've packaged it in such a way to make that very easy. Qrypt has decoupled that and also eliminated the key distribution mechanism to make it much more secure and resilient. So you have to effectively break into the endpoint. You can't be a man in the middle. You can't be doing what they've clearly been doing with the big telecoms in this country. They got really on the backbone where they could harvest anything they wanted. They filter exactly the data that they're targeting based on IP address or whatever else. They store all that and wait until they can decrypt it in the future. And the worst part of it is they got into the counterintelligence piece of it, which was the monitoring of the hacker networks on that infrastructure. So Harvest Now Decrypt Later has been around for century at this point. It's worked. It's effective. Cybersecurity researcher will find a flaw in the mechanisms we're using today, or these post-quantum cryptography algorithms will be broken by some innovation in math or physics. We just don't know. So we have to be prepared for that eventuality. No cryptographic algorithm has stood the test of time. That's never happened.
That's so. Let me make sure I kind of understand it. So, like you the approach that you guys have taken is that getting away from kind of public distribution of keys, go to kind of quantum keys, which is kind of asterisk, kind of like need to understand that, and those keys they would normally be on the endpoints, and so so next to with what I'm kind of thinking there is that I'm in a facility, I might be on a local area network, a wireless network, what have you. I have say 500 desktops. And so there's a device there or a piece of software there that is servicing those devices. And then there's endpoints, or destination, points that are, I guess, enabled by, that corporation. So maybe it's within their facilities or maybe it's one building to another building or one partner to another partner. And then they also have a set of keys. And so there's got to be some kind of a handshake that happens, between those keys in order for those communications to happen. And so in that, you're basically encrypting from endpoint to endpoint. So there's nothing in the middle that can be, and especially if you're on an in the best case scenario, which I think is what you mentioned, is that you have one glass, of fiber going between these 10 points. So, all right, you know that you can't kind of tap into that, so you have that security, physical security, and then you have the encryption security on top of that. So and now you kind of taken that key distribution, and you kind of moved it out into the cloud.
Yeah.
So
exactly.
you don't have to have them on the devices, as well. So is that, in a nutshell, kind of like the Qrypt approach?
Yeah. So we've taken all the physical device requirements at the endpoint and put
Yeah.
all that in data centers in the cloud and made it accessible. You can think of an analogy with digital certificates. We used to have to go to a notary public to get one. We don't do that anymore. We used to use machines, localized machines in our data centers. Now we have VMs. We had physical hard drives to store all of our pictures. Now we have the cloud. We use containers. All this, the same thing will happen with all quantum hardware. It's already happening, of course, with quantum computers. You're not going to have one in your house. You'll just use it as a cloud resource. The same thing with quantum secure encryption systems. You mentioned earlier the quantum entropy source, the quantum random number generators. Those are absolutely critical to security because if there's ever a flaw found in the way that we generate keys, and this is the oldest story of brute force decryption of traffic, that is where every intelligence agency goes. So that problem has long ago been solved by the US government. They built their own quantum entropy sources. We have licensed those and made those available to commercial industry. So they never get into that problem. They can buy that hardware, they can use it as a resource in the cloud, and they can generate absolutely secure encryption keys. And we know that this is going on because it's one of those really hard things to observe when nation states are protecting their sources and methods. But when you see people finding flaws in key generation and guessing private keys for cryptocurrency, you can see cryptocurrency being stolen because it's on the blockchain. It's very public. There's no way to see that when it's on your enterprise infrastructure. And again, if I was on the dark side, I protect that above everything else, and I will always find some patsy to blame a breach on or ransomware and so on.
Awesome. So, all right. So I have a couple of, thoughts that are kind of coming up. First of all, it would be so nice. So this is almost seems like, the ultimate in kind of zero trust,
Yeah,
you
it's
know,
implicitly zero trust. That's right.
so which is another beautiful use case here, meaning that, um, there's one way to think about this is to make sure all your communications are secure and that you are unhackable. There's another part of this as well is that we segment the heck out of our infrastructure in order to reduce the blast radius in case there is some exposure, and also to manage traffic and implement policies. It's like you can also see how this provides kind of a direct one-to-one communications channel that's secure, that you get rid of all that segmentation, and with it, all the toil and all the hassle that's associated with that infrastructure. It cleans up, the security, or the network, kind of that intersection between networking and security infrastructure. So, it's like, I'm sure that you guys have kind of thought about that, but it's like, is that part of, the use cases that are being deployed, or one of the use cases that are being deployed within your customer base?
Absolutely. We absolutely believe in zero trust, and it's implicitly that we don't believe that you should have to trust anything between the two endpoints. So it is absolutely establishing end-to-end encryption to the client devices or client server, whatever it might be. And that really is the future. Again, we built the internet for a completely different reason, right? We built surveillance capitalism on everyone being able to data mine everything in between the endpoints and monetize that. That model has
Hmm.
to die for enterprise cybersecurity, government systems, and so on, where it's intolerable to experience that kind of a loss in the future, when in many companies' cases, it's an existential threat. And if you look at where AI is going, no one's going to be able to afford a Grok-like data center with tens of thousands of GPUs. And you're going to have to use someone else's data center to monetize your data. How do you
Hmm.
get that data again, which is proprietary? It's never left your data center, but you have to load it into a GPU cluster someplace on the other side of the world. And that's probably
Yeah.
not going to be in the US, because these things are going to be built where power is cheap, land is cheap, and so on. So I've got to trust that infrastructure is not owned by Huawei or ZTE or hacked by some major black hat hacker somewhere. I got to get it to the endpoint, and we've demonstrated this live from Langley, Virginia, to a site in Australia, where we can establish quantum secure connectivity between those two endpoints, and we assume all the data in between is harvesting and transiting nodes controlled by China. And it won't matter. They can no longer do any decryption on that data because the key material was never in that channel. It was never in flight. And there's multiple
Yeah.
different ways to deploy that. And again, there's other properties to it, which we call it implicit authentication, where if you go from, there's two modes of operation. One is quantum safe, which is using AES encryption. One is absolutely quantum secure, which is using full one-time pad encryption. That is a property called implicit authentication, where if you can decrypt a packet, it came from the intended sender. If you cannot decrypt it, it did not come from them, so you don't have a separate authentication step. And we
Yeah.
do privileged access management, of course, where different sets of key material go to different endpoints. So if you accidentally receive a file or an encrypted package from somebody, if you can decrypt it, it was meant from you. If you can't decrypt it because you didn't have the key material the way we generate it, it doesn't matter that we sent it to you. You can never decrypt it.
Hmm. So there are two big pieces of this, right? There's obviously the key generation, and then there's actually like the key, the magic that the key does to do the encryption. So I'm almost like cringing to ask this question, but okay, So where does the quantum come into that? Because it's such a key part of the security and the trust that you have in this system, that it is like impossible to de-encrypt, if you don't have the key, right? So you're protecting the keys, and you're protecting the key distribution, and you're protecting how the data gets encrypted as well. So
Yeah, the the quantum
So
hard
where's the quantum part?
the quantum is the quantum hardware that we use. It's the raw materials that you need to generate all encryption keys. This is what was developed by
Hmm.
great expense by the government for their own purposes, so they have their own very expensive version of it. What we license from the government is the ability to make that very inexpensive, make that a 1U appliance that you can co-locate with your HSM. It can go into your data centers. You can use it as a cloud service for us. And it only does one thing. It gives you the raw materials at any endpoint in the world, the entropy as a service, to be able to generate keys at the endpoint. You still need some more of our algorithms and our crypto mathematics magic to make that work at the endpoint, and that's
Yeah.
what generates the keys. All of that's published. And I will say on the quantum entropy sources, all of ours are ESV certified. They're FIPS compliant appliances. No one should believe that these things are actually quantum in nature unless someone has published it and it's been validated by a national lab type entity. It's very easy to fake quantum entropy. It's very
Hmm.
easy to fake randomness, and people have exploited this for generations to do bulk decryption. And I can send you lots of examples, or you can go to our website and see them. I love the example of Crypto AG. If you saw how that was done for diplomatic communications, where the most secure algorithms and software was used, but the randomness generation mechanism, the key material, was flawed. And when you
Oh,
can do that, you can see everything in real time without a supercomputer or quantum computer or anything else. That's why we're obsessive about the quantum hardware. And again, that's all forward deployed in the cloud, or you can
yeah.
just buy it as an on-prem appliance.
Yeah. Awesome. Great. Thank you. One other question. Quantum entropy.
Yeah.
Definition, please.
Entropy is often confused with how messy your room is. It's highly
Yeah,
disordered,
Schrödinger's
high,
cat, yeah.
high entropy, right? But in physics, it's unfortunately that's a 200-year-old physics term that has a very specific meaning in quantum mechanics, and it was borrowed by computer science and mathematics to mean something very different. So entropy is the only origin of quantum entropy is the only origin of randomness that we know of in the universe. A coin flip is not random. It's just that we're missing information about how hard we flip the coin and so on. It
Yeah.
is knowable. I can predict with 100% accuracy the coin flip's outcome if I know certain things about its initial conditions. That's not true in quantum mechanics. The outcome of a quantum coin flip is fundamentally unknowable because of the uncertainty principle in quantum mechanics, which is a topic for another day. But that
Mhm.
origin of all of that is the entropy that's inherent in quantum mechanics, and that's
Oh,
fundamentally traceable to the entanglement of all particles in the universe. Again, a much bigger discussion, but you can think about it as the only source of randomness that we know about in all of science. Yes, the term random in statistical uh, computer science and so on means how unpredictable are the digits in the series. They may look random, but they may absolutely have a pattern. And there's no mathematical function that you can ever invent that can produce a random number. Randomness only comes from a physical process. The only source we know about is quantum mechanics. Well, you have an EE background, thermal electronic noise that has
mm,
patterns in it. Yeah, it might be hard to detect that, but it's not actually random.
yeah. Okay, awesome. Great. Thank you. Thank you for that. And very important note on quantum entropy. Okay, great. So let's kind of bubble it up a little bit, like around, so use cases, we talked a little bit, we talked about zero trust. We also talked, you mentioned another one, which was really great, and you're right, when you kind of look at like the GPU clusters, like a colossal, like with them to be able to connect 100,000 GPUs and to solve the networking problem to do that, using kind of a class, um, kind of lossless mesh, mesh architecture. That was kind of a breakthrough. We'll see others attempt that. We've heard obviously, Elon wants to go to about 1 million. Microsoft has basically announced that they're I guess budgeting planning for like 1 million GPUs, as well. Meta 600,000, for Lambda. There's these numbers are getting big, and then the question is the power consumption of that, which brings in networking, right? So like in networking, can we kind of move these AI data centers to areas that are less expensive for power, and so we can distribute the results. So have computation done somewhere remotely, and then maybe the North Pole or something like that. And then distribute them back with networking. So that's and so that data transfer. So if you're thinking about, you're taking a lot of your corporate data that you want to feed into a training model, right? So then you need a real way to kind of securely transport that, and that's another great use case, for Qrypt. I think any kind of like really bulk sensitive data transfer for any kind of computation that's going to be off your site is probably going to be a great use case. What other kind of use cases? I don't want to kind of limit, to those. I think the zero trust one is a big use case because everyone needs a zero trust infrastructure. But what what are you seeing like most of your customers deploying, and for why, and why for?
Yeah, so the AI use case is a phenomenal one because, of course, it's public now, but NVIDIA is our biggest partner. So we have integrated that Qrypt quantum key generation mechanism directly into their next generation of Bluefield 3 DPUs. These are extraordinarily performant, high performance NICs, if you can think of it that way, that can quantum secure connectivity within a data center where you might have shared infrastructure across different GPU clusters, and it can do the same exact type of connectivity between data centers anywhere in the world. And it's completely decoupled from the underlying servers that it sits in. It has its own communications channel outside of the server. So you can establish that quantum secure connection to upload training data from anywhere in the world to that cluster. We've also, the exact same use case you talked about, it's already being built overseas in a mega AI complex there, where the data center infrastructure is tied to the business infrastructure. And the company that's doing this, it's a huge pharmaceutical company. They want their training data to be quantum secure encrypted directly to where it's uploaded onto the training GPU cluster, not anywhere on a NAS or anything else on the network infrastructure. They want it to be, they do not want it to be exposed anyplace else. The same exact, again, mechanism establishes that quantum secure channel for messaging, for example. So Air Force, we did an integration with their big messaging and file transfer platform called Mattermost, which some folks might be familiar with on this call, where you love the Mattermost interface, you love the chat functionality and everything else on it, but you don't want to trust Mattermost with any of your data in an unencrypted state. So the example goes back to what happened with Zoom. They said they had end-to-end encryption. In fact, the keys were all generated on servers in China, and all the sessions were routed to those servers in China for US-only phone calls. So that's not what we mean by end-to-end encryption. We mean only Alice and Bob can see the traffic. Here, you don't have to trust Mattermost anymore because they're not involved in the key generation mechanism. They're the front-end interface that you see. They move around all the packets and data that you want, but they were never involved in the key exchange. So they could never decrypt the data, even if they were subpoenaed or anything else. So any use case like that, again, it's that zero trust piece of it. I don't like to throw around a lot of buzzwords, but that's implicitly what it is, because it is truly quantum secure and end-to-end encrypted, where, again, all the trust goes away from everyone else involved. Use all the same tools.
Okay, great. So I think I finally understand what you did with NVIDIA. So okay, great. So you're kind of right at the DPU.
Yes, exactly.
So that point. So are you seeing kind of AI infrastructure kind of utilize this like between like within the fabric itself? So kind of like provide quantum encryption within the fabric, or is it like for incoming on the network? So a lot of training data that's coming into that cluster, or both. So
it's both, because in many of these data centers, there's multiple GPU clusters. They might not all be NVIDIA. They may all be connected by DPUs or not. Some of those might even be other companies doing it. But you don't want to have to trust the infrastructure provider for that GPU cluster with any of your data. Certainly not between clusters. That's another point of exposure. And you want to eliminate, you mentioned the blast radius and the attack surface. So someone physically must have to touch the inside of that box where the DPU sits, or inside of the cluster that the data is moving across, rather than in the network infrastructure in a data center or between data centers and so on. You want all that to die and go away, and all that trust to be evaporated as quickly as possible. Again, not going back to
Yeah.
pick on the telecoms, but what happened there is that some of that data is apparently unencrypted at those sites. Why should that have ever have happened? You should never have had to trusted anyone on that.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Great use case, Dennis. And thanks so much. Like I said, I've known that you guys have had that relationship with NVIDIA. I didn't connect all the dots to that until now. So thanks so much, for that. That's a huge use case, because it's like now you're a part of the supply chain
Yeah,
to NVIDIA's infrastructure, AI infrastructure, and it'd be great to see others like Broadcom and AMD and and others start to like actually take advantage of that as well. I'm sure the market's going to demand it. It's like there's got to be a sense of trust, and that's actually you build trust into that infrastructure by enabling kind of quantum encryption, across all of that sensitive data that's being processed and generated. So
it's in everyone's
that
interest, right? Everyone,
yeah,
the people that run the GPU clusters, they don't want to be liable for the data. They want all that trust to go away. And there's a fear now that, look, we're going to build all these huge AI data centers. They're like an airplane sitting on the ground. If they're not being used 100% of the time, they're depreciating right away. And this
mm,
generation of GPUs, they will be obsolete in a couple of years. So you don't have a lot of time to really monetize these places, and the scale at which they're built and the cost is extraordinary. So they really have to maximize the utility of them. And again, building that trust for the high value data, not kind of the junky stuff that could be monetized for non-critical purposes. You want pharmaceutical data going there. You want big government data being processed in there. You want energy, all the things that are really important and can be
yeah.
monetized.
Yeah. It's interesting too, like, on kind of the AI acceleration curve, it's like, it's not just kind of how quick the technology is being developed, but also it's like the economics, as you mentioned, it's like we spent over $200 billion this year on AI infrastructure. That it has like a half-life of what, 2 years,
Right.
before it gets replaced, and then, so you've got to really, kind of utilizing that capacity all the time at the highest utilization levels possible in order to get like a return on that investment. It boggles my mind that everything that we built, not everything, but like a good chunk of what we built, I'm not sure what it's going to look like in 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. That return on that capital, it's going to be pretty short, it seems. And so you got to really be able to generate a huge amount of revenue in order to kind of justify that. And it seems like, if you look at the quarterly reports from both from Meta and from Google, it seems like, and also from Microsoft, they're doing a good job. They're able to kind of monetize it.
There's
So
also the
okay.
competing interests
So
of.
Dennis, I do have. I want. No, go ahead.
Sorry, the competing interest is that from the other side, all the big companies that are sitting on massive piles of proprietary data that's never touched the internet before, they know to stay competitive in their industry, they have to monetize that by using these huge GPU clusters. But the
Mm,
risk is existential. If you're, again, been developing drugs for 30 years, your genetic data, all the stuff that you've bought and acquired and tested at great expense for decades suddenly leaves your enterprise. You have to trust that someone operating something, wherever third world country, is not going to sell that, turn around, sell that data. You are out of business. That's where all the value in your company is, in that data. And if everyone else can go train on a GPU cluster someplace the same way you can, if they got access to the data, then they can outcompete you. They didn't spend any money on that data anymore.
yeah. Yeah, I tell you, I'm glad that you brought up kind of the pharmaceuticals and the drug discovery, piece of this, as well. Like for next year, we have Pfizer and Merck that are going to really be taking center stage, both in the spring and also in the fall, time frame. We'll also have Raytheon in the fall time frame, also talking about kind of AI and defense, kind of use cases. But the drug piece of this, like, for the fall time frame, I know that you were at the fall event with us. I'm not sure if you got to see Svi Gal's presentation, his keynote, but just to hear what Memorial Sloan Kettering is doing with their AI infrastructure and how much it's accelerated cancer research, how many various cancers that they viewed are cured or have vaccines for. Like in 5 years, like the one graphic that Svi put up there, I think blew everybody away, and that is 5-year vaccine for like breast cancer and prostate cancer, melanoma. It's like we are just on this amazing cusp of, you know, improving the human condition at a level that we've never seen or could have imagined, before. It was like Richard Nixon had basically said, a war against cancer, and what was that, like in the 60s, So, it's, so maybe the time is right, but I think, it's like we need to enable that. And I think by having, putting trust in this sensitive data so that it can be processed. I think you guys do a great job. And I think going back to our early conversation is that what brought you into like the intelligence community was to provide security, not just, kind of nation security, but also security for a very big part of our nation. And that's its, economic infrastructure and the economy that we all, participate in. So great job, Dennis, and you and all the folks over at, Qrypt. Great, really super great job.
Appreciate it. Yeah, we love
Yeah.
participating in the community, and I think that one of the big things in cancer research and drug discovery will be quantum computers as well, because you can't model molecules even with supercomputers. You can barely do tiny, tiny molecules, but with modestly sized quantum computers, now you can model proteins. You can model drugs without having to test them on people or animals and so on, and see exactly what they do. So we're entering a completely unknown world right now. We're in a unique time in history at this threshold where AI systems have evolved so quickly, certainly faster than quantum, but they're on a path to convergence. And when they converge, we're in an unknown, unpredictable, really industries that had never existed before. Drug discovery, energy, everything that you can think of changes all very, very quickly in a time that we've never had before in history.
I know it's like so great to be alive right now. Just even thinking about the material sciences and the new kinds of materials that we'll have, you know. Yeah. So all right. So on that note, let's end with a few predictions for 2025.
Oh,
Um, have you thought, about 2025 and any predictions that you want to share?
yeah, I thought that cybersecurity is going to continue on a kind of a downward spiral in the types of hacks that we're going to see enabled. Not just the com. My fear is that people focus on the really easy to understand common things, right? A password was hacked, some new super LLM enabled phishing campaigns work. It's the stuff that's not sexy that people miss and don't really understand, so it's not easily articulated in an article that's accessible to everyone. Those are the things that I really hope will get a lot more light in next year, and I write about that a lot. So hopefully we'll see less of that and more activity focused on that rather than the easy to fix things. I also think that the
Yeah.
acceleration of quantum computing, United Nations has named 2025 the year of quantum. I really hope to see those use cases come out of quantum computing companies, and I hope to see the remaining ones that have been in stealth, that some of whom we are very friendly with and know, reveal what they've been working on. It's interesting that that community has become so quiet and focused on keeping their proprietary secrets to maintain that advantage. I hope that changes in 2025 and we get access to a lot more information and a lot more excitement about where that's going. But I also see huge changes in people's perceptions of what's coming and how long it will take to get there. In my case, it's with the transition to quantum secure, quantum safe systems. I really
Yeah.
anticipate that that will accelerate now that the NIST standards were finally finished in August. So that those are
Yeah.
my prescriptions for next year.
Awesome. Well, I think I have. I have one off the top of my head. I might have another one, but I think Nvidia goes on a big buying spree in the kind of infrastructure space um, to to expand out kind of their networking offering. So that's one. I'm not going to say who I think they're going to buy, but I think that's a good one. I'm thinking also like it's interesting. I think AMD is probably, even though you look at Broadcom's like, they're clearly being rewarded. Like you look at like, over the last like 2 weeks, like stock prices at Arista, Tesla, Broadcom have been on a frigging crazy tear. It's like Tesla this morning was like what 460. Arista was they did a 4-to-1 stock split, and now they're trading at almost like 120, 117. Broadcom is now in the $1 trillion market cap club. So I think, it's, we need a healthier AI supply chain, infrastructure supply chain. Hats off to NVIDIA. They did an amazing job, vertically integrated, offering, right place, right time, but I think, in order for this to really be a very healthy market, we need some of these other companies to be able to compete. And maybe that will happen as we move from training to inference. But AMD is in a good position. Broadcom's in a good position, as well, in order to provide some choice and options, there also. So I think that's so. Anyways, so long-winded answer or long-winded explanation for a prediction, and I think 2025 is also the year of more choice and more options around how we build this infrastructure out. So.
It's a year of change, I think.
Yeah, year of change. Yeah, and excitement. Really, I think really super bullish, for 2025. So, all right, Dennis, that was so much fun. I want to thank you so much for like spending the time and sharing, so much of all of your expertise, with everyone. So, thanks so much, and happy holidays.
Thanks for having me and happy holidays. See you in the spring.